Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism and narcissistic relationships and just toxic stuff in general. So today's video is a question which came up, which is I find myself thinking back to my recent narcissistic relationship that ended. Am I having flashbacks? So that's the question. So I'm sure more than a few of you find yourself thinking about, especially if it's a recent or in the last year breakup, you keep thinking about the relationship. Now, many people, even a ways out from a narcissistic relationship, and I think the more severe the relationship, the more you may do this, they find themselves continuing to think about the relationship. But maybe you're thinking about it in new ways, okay? So, for example, you may literally think back to an argument you had years ago, or about a sort of an odd behavior pattern that never made sense, or things they may have said about you or about your family or your work. But you may now find yourself thinking about this, but unpacking it in a new way and saying, oh my gosh, yeah, that was gaslighting, or oh, that was them baiting me, or oh, that was them getting supply by being charming in public. And then they were yelling me on the way home. Oh, that was the hot and cold. Oh, or that was them shaming me. That was projection, right? But then what might happen as you're sort of putting this whole puzzle together, you might get frustrated with yourself for going back there and still thinking about this relationship. This may even get more frothed up, for example. Let's say you're watching a movie or a TV show that has a narcissistic character or a narcissistic relationship, or maybe someone is sharing with you the story of their own narcissistic relationship. And in listening to that or watching that, it may take you back. You may even find yourself screaming at the TV or frustrated with someone who isn't getting at it. Like, don't you see you're being gaslighted or you're being manipulated? Because now you see it, right? And then you go back to your story and it's almost like having a decoder ring, like, oh, that's that and that's that. Now, so what I've heard some people wonder is like, Dr. Ramani, am I having flashbacks? Am I thinking about my old relationship because I'm not over this? Am I forever going to be stuck? And my answer is probably not, or not necessarily. In fact, it may not necessarily be a bad thing. Now, flashbacks are in fact trauma responses that can linger long after the trauma is over. Something in your environment will trigger them, usually something that was reminiscent of the original trauma. Flashbacks can also be really, really vivid. You might feel as though you're reliving it and having reactions within you like it's happening in current time. Some people, when they have flashbacks, may feel like they're seeing images. You might even be pulled in by other sensations like sounds or smells. You may feel bodily or somatic sensations that are similar to the trauma you experienced. Flashbacks might last a while, several minutes. Flashbacks may also only last a few seconds, but they can be very unsettling because for a moment, it's like you are experiencing or re-experiencing some or many aspects of the original trauma, and it will often jar you out of the situation that you are presently in. Now, flashbacks do sometimes happen. It's not typical, but flashbacks can sometimes happen for some survivors of narcissistic abuse, especially when it was long term, chronic, and more severe narcissistic abuse. That's the sideline because I want us to unpack this idea of going backwards, especially if something's reminding you of those patterns in your relationship and starting to understand patterns in your narcissistic relationship in a new way. I think more often that that's not a flashback. It's something that we can call sort of contextualization. So when you were initially in your narcissistic relationship, okay, it was all self-blame and all confusion all the time. I'm sure at times it even felt surreal. It was like a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle with a lot of pieces missing, making it really frustrating, and you could never quite figure out the picture that you were putting together or whether the pieces fit together. However, I'd imagine since you're watching this channel, you're there. As you learned about narcissistic abuse and started having names for things and what patterns really are, and understanding how this personality style is organized and how it shows up in your relationships and what the narcissistic defenses are and what gaslighting is, it is literally like getting a decoder ring. Now the bizarre behavior at Thanksgiving 10 years ago makes perfect sense. So as you ruminate about the relationship, and you will ruminate, it's an absolutely guaranteed part of narcissistic abuse fallout. Part of it is taking that decoder ring and making sense of what happened to you. It's actually not such a bad thing, because in a way you're practicing identifying these dynamics in your story. And once you do that, you may actually be able to start lifting some of the blame, because you can see these patterns in a different context. You just couldn't see them when they first happened on them. Now I'm going to say something silly here. I have an app on my phone, right? I can use it to take pictures of a leaf or a flower or a tree, and the app identifies the plant or the tree. For some reason, not knowing the names of plants and trees frustrated me. That's a me thing. Once I got the app, I actually find that I enjoy walks more. I just enjoy like being out in the world more, and I have a different way of describing the things around me. It relieved a strange tension in me, because now I know that if that's a scrub oak tree or that's a sago palm or whatever, I like knowing that. So knowing what a scrub oak is very different from saying, I know, obviously it's a tree, but it's different, but it's similar to saying, oh, that was actually his insecurity, not my foolishness. Or, yeah, she did always throw a tantrum before important events for me, ruining it and leaving me even more insecure going in, which gave her the chance to soothe me and play the savior. Once you have the decoder ring, you're able to go back and make sense. It's like getting all those puzzle pieces back to finish the picture. But many survivors think that they're stuck, obsessing and ruminating and thinking it'll never get better. I keep thinking about it. I reassure them that actually, in many of these cases, they're just going back and decoding and decontextualizing the whole mess. It's like putting Post-its all over your old relationship. And this isn't actually a waste of time, because it lets you flex a muscle so you may recognize these patterns more clearly in future people you meet. Stop blaming yourself, stop self-gaslighting, and if the person is still in your life, have a better defense when that behavior rolls up again. Years later, many of us will look back and say, golly, I wish it made this much sense then. Yeah, you're right. Uncracking this code is like learning a second language, and it's probably something we should have learned in school, but alas, that is not the case. So there is a learning curve, as there always is when we're learning a new language. And once we learn this language, this formula, it helps us make sense of the past. And while it can feel like flashbacks, it's actually and hopefully a tool that we can use in the present and in the future. But I am going to say, as an aside, if you are indeed experiencing flashbacks from your narcissistic relationship, that is in fact a more pressing clinical issue that would require trauma-informed therapy to explore this issue and to help manage the distress these kinds of re-experiencing patterns and symptoms may cause. Please refer to the video notes for some resources that you can turn to get more information. Thanks again.